Welcome to the Chase and Embrace Show, where we interview women who are chasing God and embracing His purpose for her life, with the hopes to encourage you to do the thing that God is calling you to do. Hey everyone, welcome to the show, Chase and Embrace. I am your host, Sharon, and with me today is a beautiful daughter of Jesus, and her name is Kristy Stevens. I am so happy to have you on the show today. We've been trying to get this to happen, and it finally is.
Yes. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Kristy, we have known each other for a super long time. I mean, I don't even know. It's probably been at least 15 years. And the way that we met, I was working at an organization, and it was a shelter for women and men, but separate. And you were one of the people that ended up coming in and needed a place to stay and to get some help. And you know, how did it end up that ended up needing to come to a shelter?
So I will go back just a little ways to
Yeah.
lay the groundwork for how something like that can, happen for someone. So for me, I started out in life and I was abused as a child, and I always carried just shame and guilt around that with me, and it fueled my decision making. What my choices were. I didn't know it, of course, at the time, but that was
Right. Why do
what
you
was
think
happening.
Yeah, so why do you think the abuse fueled shame and guilt on you? Explain that a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah, because I was, just a little baby. I was a little baby. I was a little girl. It happened until I was 5, and it was a family member. And, I didn't know something was wrong, but I knew something was wrong. And when it came to light, my mom must have been suspicious or something of that nature. And so she, asked me some questions, and I'm of course a little girl, so just answering her honestly. And then her reaction to that was, she was horrified, and she broke down in tears. And my mom and I were very close, and I didn't quite understand her reaction to me telling her something that on most levels, thought everyone knew. Like I didn't, I was just little, and I
Right.
didn't
You
know.
didn't know it was a
I
secret.
didn't know it was, yeah, exactly. And so, and it was somebody that was very, very close to her, we'll say. And so for that reason, like her reaction, I just was really kind of scared and embarrassed and felt like I had done something wrong and that it was my fault. And so it was like a shame shower almost, just from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. And so anytime in life after that, when I would experience the feeling of shame, it would feel like that. It was just overwhelming and very sad and scary. And it was a feeling I wanted to escape. I didn't want to feel that feeling, which led into later on in life, trying drugs and alcohol. And so once I tried alcohol, I liked it. I liked that I didn't feel like myself, like I didn't like the way I felt in normal everyday life. And so that drew me.
How
And
old were
then
you?
when I first tried alcohol, I want to say I was probably 13. And that day when I drank to get drunk. I just wanted more and more and more. And so which didn't take much. And so that
Right.
was my immediate reaction to the substance. And so it wasn't as though I was drunk from then on or anything like that. But when I would go to a party in high school or things like that, it was always to drink for the feeling and to feel different than the way I felt normally. And that was just how I was wired, I guess you'd say. And so from there, I went into high school, graduated high school, even with honors. I had a learning disability, but I had a lot of support and help, and a mom that really fought for me to help me get the
Oh, that's
support I needed for my dyslexia. And so I was able to, thrive in academics in a way that I otherwise wouldn't be able to. So that was really
awesome.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I went to college at University of Idaho and joined a sorority, and there was quite a bit of partying, and I'm sure I probably partied more than a lot of the other girls. But again, just wanting to fit in and having all those feelings that young ladies have about being enough or fitting in and being important, mixed with that shame and guilt from my younger years that was still with me. Alcohol was a great respite for me, not a healthy one, but one that I would turn to more and more. So, and then about a year
The
after,
thing about
yeah,
growing up, it's like it is so hard. Because
yeah,
all you care about, and I don't know if it's because our brains aren't fully developed or if it's just that we're too much into the world or what it is, but we care too much about what people think. I mean,
absolutely.
that was a huge issue for me growing up
Yeah,
and why I went down the road of doing drugs and stuff because I was in high school and my parents were getting a divorce and just the pain I wanted to numb. And I didn't like alcohol. So I turned to drugs
yeah.
and almost failed out of high school. And I was like an A B student
Hmm.
and, but ended up graduating. And it's just once I started doing drugs, it was like I was more accepted by people at school too. And it was
Yeah.
just weird. It's like everyone's in pain and they want everybody else to be in pain and they want you to do these, it's just like this horrible vicious cycle of growing up. And there might be normal people out there, but I don't know many of them. Do you?
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't know. I think that's an illusion that we find out later on is absolutely untrue. The more we get to
Yeah.
be fully ourselves
Yes.
in life, and then people can be open and react accordingly. You find that there's, so many of us that just were hurting in whatever way and chose the
Yeah.
path that was kind of we were exposed to and the path that uh, just made us feel better.
Because it was really interesting that you say that because one of the most popular girls, I ended up being friends with her years later. And so she described a lot of the pain and the experiences that she had in high school. I mean, she was in an abusive relationship. Her mom was extremely unhealthy and overweight, and people would tease her and all this stuff. You just don't realize it. You're like in this own bubble and you see this persona that people give, and it's all lies,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And I
And I
just
think
don't
that
even don't even know what the solution for that is.
I don't know. I think I've pondered that a lot having two girls. I have two girls
Yes.
and two daughters. And so I've really pondered that a lot. And I think through my experience and through, reading the Bible and getting to know Jesus as, my closest friend. And, he was a servant leader. He was of service. And I think if I had to stake money on it, I'd say being of service seems to be the antidote to those feelings and all
Yeah,
of that
getting out
because
of ourselves and
getting
giving
out
to
of
others.
ourselves, yes, and being known and knowing others and feeling a sense of purpose and really just helping. And I think, as I have my girls and, I take them to go serve at, a food bank. It's like a food ministry that there is that's up kind of by my house. And we go there on Saturday mornings when we can. And, just help and get to interface with those people that are, that was once me and pray for them. And yeah,
That's
that just
awesome.
it seems to be the answer to it.
Yeah,
Uh,
what's really funny is I took my daughter on search and rescue. So a
huh?
search and rescue is a van that goes out into the streets of Seattle, and I'm sure there's other ones in other cities, but and we serve food and give them blankets and warm clothing. And so I brought my daughter with the intent that this is what drugs and alcohol can do. We have addiction in our family, and so, I don't know how much influence it had on her, but, she did make some different choices that I wouldn't have liked. But for the most part, she's an amazing daughter. She's a great young woman and she's got her master's degree and she's helping in a research study. So she's an amazing daughter, and
Yeah,
just person all around. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think even if it's only a few times that exposure, I think
Yeah.
it plants a seed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does for sure.
yeah,
So
yeah,
after college, so you were a
mhm,
sorority and then you were
yeah.
partying.
Yes, and so I actually stepped away after a year and moved back home with my folks. And still had a sister living at home. My brother had gotten injured in college, so he was back. He was playing football and almost lost his leg in an injury, so he was back at home as well. So there we were, kind of back there, and I thought, I'll get a job at Costco. I did, but I did feel like a failure. I felt like, this kind of trajectory that I was on, I wasn't good enough. Again, kind of
Right.
reinforcing that false belief system, and so I did that, and ended up becoming friends with one of the gals I worked with, and we got an apartment together. And so at least I was moving out on my own, and moving forward in the way that I perceived that, young people as they move out into the world should be going. So that was good. That was positive. And college was hard, even, of course, with the drinking and things, but learning was different. It wasn't that same support that I had had before with
Right.
my learning disabilities. So that was also a piece that played into it. And so yeah, so I got an apartment with this gal and we were working at Costco. I was becoming unreliable for sure, just with the different, choices I was making with substances and things like that. But one
So you
evening,
started partying a lot?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I was just continuing to party because, again, I wanted to numb and that felt like the answer. And so that was what I had done.
And was your roommate the same way?
She was, but she wasn't quite as full throttle as me. But yes, she was. And she had a boyfriend who was not a good guy. And he came over with I grew up in Alaska, side note. I grew up in Alaska. So I had never seen white powdered drugs. I'd only seen them on the movies or, the after school specials when they like
Uh-huh.
hemorrhage from the face, the most worst scenario, right? So we're drinking one evening and he comes over and we've actually smoked a little weed as well, which I didn't actually like weed, and the combination was terrible. So when
Yes, a
we
downer.
were, yeah, we were already making bad choices and not in a good frame of mind. So when he did that, he brought that out and everyone was going to do it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I know it can kill me. I'm not doing that. But
Yeah.
as the evening went on, they kept, come on, do it. The peer pressure.
Right.
Finally, they said to me, if we do it first and we don't bleed out of our noses, then you won't either. And I thought, for whatever reason, that was like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, I'll try it. So I share all that in detail to share with you that I was that girl that once you try drugs and you're instantly hooked. I was hooked. I loved the feeling. It was exactly the feeling, that the answer to the feeling of that shame that I had had. And this made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I wasn't worried about, what anyone else thought. And so that I was off and running at that point.
Was it cocaine or crystal meth?
It was meth. Yeah, it was meth. And I didn't really know a lot about it either. It
You
was
know,
just like,
it's funny
yeah.
because when I started using drugs, I that's
Mhm.
what I did too, was meth,
Yeah.
but we called it crystal because
Yeah.
this was like early on. It was
Yeah.
called crystal and then but now then it was crystal meth, but we took the crystal part and then it somehow turned into meth. But yeah, meth is it's definitely makes you feel very powerful.
And it's such a lie. And you're actually just the opposite. I was a slave immediately. I immediately became, untrustworthy and, lying, cheating, stealing, whatever, not to the nth degree at first, but wasn't a long time, maybe a year, where that progression took effect. And I, like, whatever I needed to do in order to get that, I was going to do. Yeah, so that's when I was off and running at that point. And so, and then, you go down a couple of decades of that behavior and get to a point where you're, breaking the law, of course. And, you come to a road where it's either, if you want to stay doing your drug of choice and maybe dabbling in others as well, you can't afford it, right? Because you're not working or anything. So you
Right.
either, often people will, especially women, will turn to either, selling themselves or selling drugs. And since I'd had that abuse in my early childhood, I was not going to sell myself. So I chose to try to sell drugs. And so I did that, but I'm not the most inconspicuous person. So it didn't take long for me to get into to get caught with doing that. That was, I ended up having to face charges for, drug
Yeah.
charges for that. And to get to your original question, once I was finished with serving my time, I was in prison for a year. It was actually 9 months. They usually give you 3 months off for good behavior. So, of course, when I'm not on those things, and I'm myself, I'm a very good person and good behavior. And I'll say I know now today who I am today. I've always been a good person, but there was I just feel like you get hijacked. You do that, you say yes that one time, and the next thing you know, you're just nowhere near the person you really are. And so,
Right.
yeah, so I went to prison, and then from there, my family and friends, I didn't have anyone anymore. I burned all my bridges, which I completely understand that having happened. And so when I needed to be released to an address, I had nowhere to go. And this brings me to the shelter. So the shelter, I was lucky to have someone suggest reaching out to them, and got into communication with them and found out that they do indeed take people coming from prison, and they will allow them to come there and use their address as the release address. So you can't release from prison without an
Right.
address to go to, and then, being monitored for probation or whatever that looks like. So that shelter said yes. And then they were very quickly my family, and Jesus was through and through there. So I had, learned about God, said yes to the Lord when I was a little girl, but I didn't know what that meant. And we didn't go to church
Right.
or anything. So learned more about God in prison and in jail. There was a moment in which I was in jail waiting to go to prison, and just kind of at the bottom of the bottom. And we were in lockdown. Someone got in a fight. And so we were in lockdown and we had to sit on our bunks. And I looked over to my right on the floor, and there was this Bible. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't talk. We can't move. Like, we're not allowed to do anything. We just have to sit there until everything is safe. And so I pick up the Bible, of course, to start reading it. And I start reading it. And I have this realization, like, um, panic almost as I'm reading it. I'm like, I am on the wrong side of the story, right? I am the person in this story that is causing the pain and causing, all of the things that Jesus teaches. I'm doing the opposite. And so there's a scripture that says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I very, very clearly had that experience in that moment. And I thought to myself, and it was just me and the Lord at that moment. And I said, Lord, if you're real, help me want to change, because I was noticing in myself and in my body. By then I'd been using IV drugs. And so my addiction had very much progressed, and I wanted to get out, and I wanted to do it again. That was just, I was driven by that. And so I said, help me want to change. Because even in this moment, knowing this truth, being on the wrong side of the story, I don't want to change. I still want to do it. And I need your help, because there's nothing more I can do in and of myself to be
Right.
different, to have a different, driving factor. So please come in, intercede, and do whatever you can do. I give it all to you, kind of thing. But honestly, not thinking that he would actually answer that prayer. I'm just like, all
Right.
right. So, moving on and going back to the daily life of what it was at that time. And so all that to say, that was a very pivotal moment. It wasn't as though the heavens opened and anything instantaneous, but the God orders our steps, right? So the direction that I went. And at that moment, I didn't have a lot of choice because I'm incarcerated. But
Yeah.
the doors opened down a path where I was able to be discipled at this shelter I went to. I was able to go to church services within, being incarcerated as well. So I'm getting that a bit, but now I'm getting out and
You
I'm
know,
getting to learn what it means to
yeah.
live life with Jesus.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you had that pivotal moment, because so you're on that path, and I think we're probably about a decade younger or whatever. But same thing as you, only I never got into the dealing. My husband did at the time, not my current husband. But he did that when I met him. He did it just, part-time. And it's very interesting is I was in the midst of doing these drugs, and I met him, and so that continued because that's what he did. And I had this dream, and it was like I was living the dream and I was seeing the dream at the same time. So I was like in two modes or whatever. And it was me walking down this dark tunnel, and in front of me was just darkness, pure black. And behind me was the light. And so I remember later, and I don't remember if it was instantly when I woke up, because this was many years ago, or if I realized it later, is that in that moment, I had to make a choice. Do I continue down the road that I'm going, or do I turn around and go towards the light? And I really felt that Satan and God were fighting over my soul, and I had to make a choice. And thankfully, I turned around and followed the light. And then I ended up in some small town alone, not knowing where God was. And then I woke up, and it scared me half to death. And that was a pinnacle moment that made me start crawling back to God, because I seriously, it took 20 years, 25 years to finally have a true relationship with God. So what like you, it wasn't instantaneous. And so you're coming to the mission as one of the guests and you're learning about God. Well, I'm a staff person. I don't have a relationship with Christ, but I know who Jesus is. I could sign the form saying I believe all the things that, the word is God breathed and Jesus is my savior. I could do that, but I didn't know what a relationship was. So, but my boss at the time had said that the Holy Spirit told her to hire me. So then I started a little bit, but yeah, so it's just kind of interesting the two stories and how we come together and we're both kind of learning about Jesus, but just I'm on the staff side and you're on the guest side. And my
Yep.
job was to interview the women and the men for marketing purposes, and that's how we met. And I
Yes.
just think God's amazing, and we're still friends. I mean,
Yes.
there was a point where we didn't talk much, but we're friends again.
Yep.
And yeah, I went through another dark road. So
Yeah.
I after my stepdad died, um, I went, it was a dark road and my husband and I ended up divorced. And so I turned around and kind of rebelled again and said, God, I'm hurting and I just don't want to deal with this right now. And I'm going to walk away. So that's kind of and then through all of that, I kind of walked away from the mission and stuff. But yeah. So anyways, I just find
Yeah.
it kind of interesting how God does. And like, I'm a staff person and you're a guest, and we're still trying to figure out who God is in our life.
Yep.
Now,
Yeah.
where were your parents through your mom? Because you guys were really close at one
Yeah.
time. So where was your mom
Yeah. My
through
mom
all
was
of this?
there. She was there. She was always there for me. My dad also, but he's a construction guy. He's like in charge of building I don't know what that's called, if it's the superintendent for a large commercial
Yeah.
construction company. So as I'm growing up, he is off in remote areas of Alaska. That's why we lived in Alaska, building these different buildings. One was an Air Force base on the Aleutian Islands. So he's gone for long periods of time and really only home for maybe 3 days or 5 days here and there. And so mostly it was my mom caring for us, but she
What
worked.
about during the addiction? Where was she?
Yeah. Yeah, I think she tried to, reach me the best she could or help or, they came after about a year of my first that first year of being on the meths and things like that. They came and swooped me up and brought me to a treatment center. And so I was really not doing well at that point. And so she was continuously trying to get me the help I needed as, family of, you know, uh, addicted people do.
Right.
And so trying to figure out how to do that in a healthy way, of course, over a period of years. Nothing about it is healthy, of course, but
No.
she's trying to help. And I think just less and less as the years went on because it went on for many, many years.
And let me ask you a question, because
Mhm.
this was the thing, the pinnacle, because my mom, I caused my drug use and my wild times caused my mom heart palpitations because she was always so stressed, right? And so then I become a mom. And then I'm like, Mom, I am so, so sorry for the stress that I caused, because then you become the mom, and then you realize it's a totally it was just really eye opening once I became a mother, what I caused my mom, you know? And so I had to, even though I hadn't used drugs at that time for a while, I still had to apologize to her,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. And I did,
of,
I did do that probably a few times with my mom, but
yes,
didn't always I just kept getting drawn back into it. But my mom passed away in a very tragic car accident when she was 55, and they were driving up for a 4th of July celebration at our place in Montana. We have a property in Montana where everyone goes every 4th of July. All of our family gets together, and she had a new car. And I don't know if it was because the car was just not as familiar, whatever it was. She accidentally like overcorrected or something on a back road and drove off the road into the river and drowned. Is horrific. Yeah. And so that actually, that having happened, having her funeral, we had her funeral out there. I won't go into all those details, but
no.
At that point, I was back out into drugs and alcohol. This was prior to going to prison or anything like that. But this was one of the things. So anyway, she passed, and that was kind of a beginning of the ultimate change for me. And so I like to believe that even in her death, that was a turning point.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
never did. Like now, I always wish I could talk to her now, and I know that she's in heaven, and she believes in Jesus. So I know I will get to one day. But it's so funny. I still have terrible dreams about the things like just stealing from her or, betraying her in some way. I get dreams about that a lot. I wish, I pray a lot, and I wish that I'd have good dreams with her. But I think there's just a
Yes.
lot of guilt that I still carry with how I treated her that
Yeah. And
I
the thing
can't
is,
I
you
can't
have
do
to
anything with
forgive
really.
yourself.
Yeah, and I have.
And it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's hard, but it's like my dreams. So, I feel like
Right.
I don't have any control over that other than I can pray,
Right.
give me good dreams. I was like, can I just sit on a bench with my mom and talk with her, like, and look out on the water or something?
Yeah.
So far that has not happened, but I believe it will when I get to heaven. But
Yes, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It was probably 5 years ago now. I had this big change as far as the guilt and the forgiving of myself, which was that
Satan likes to trap us in that guilt.
well, yeah, and that's just right where he wants us. So, this scripture that says we are blameless in his sight. I was in a group of ladies and we were doing a study and broke that down. And I was like, wow, I really don't believe that. I believe that for everyone else, but I don't believe that for myself. If you had done the things that I had done, you wouldn't be able to forgive that person either. I wouldn't be able to forgive that person. So it was kind of going from that external of, wow, I'm not forgiving myself, working its way into my heart. Whereas if I believe the word of God is true and it says that I'm blameless in his sight, then I have to believe this for myself. So
Right.
it was an eye-opening time where I thought, oh my gosh, I thought I believed that like theoretically, but I didn't actually believe that for myself. And that began a big change in my heart. Whereas,
Awesome.
I am allowed to have a better life. I don't need to punish myself, nor does God want me to. So
He
yeah.
doesn't. And it is hard not to look back on those things. It's so funny now because it was that situation for me was decades ago now, And so I even forget about it sometimes, that I was even that person, because it's
Yeah.
like I'm just such a different person than what I was even 5 years ago. Jesus, when you really accept him and you just drop everything for Jesus, you really do change from the inside out and you become unrecognizable of who you think you are. But you're such a better person. You have more joy, you have more, that doesn't mean life is easy because it's not. Life is always hard, but you have a different perspective. You know that God is there with you. He's weeping with you. He's laughing with you. You're communicating with him. He's like my best friend too. We
I
both have
know.
the same best friend.
We do. He is the best friend. He
He
is.
is.
And and I think more and more too, as we kind of mature in your faith and in your relationship with the Lord, you recognize faster those moments where you come to the end of yourself, where I come to the
Yes.
end of myself, and I immediately, my prayer is, even if it's listening to someone else's story that's hard, which oftentimes I get invited into those spaces because of my own story,
Yeah.
I can listen, I can pray and ask the Lord to, Holy Spirit to fill me and be a conduit of his goodness. And then also, it's like, I just want to listen, and there's nothing I can do to even help this other person. So I'm immediately praying to the Lord to fill those spaces. But
Right.
that relationship that I have with the Lord in that way, it's just like where I end, he begins. And it's
Yes.
so beautiful. And you really are like, in our weaknesses, he is strong. And so, yeah, I
Yes.
think the more and more time goes by, we just realize, gosh, it's the best choice just to lean on him for most everything, do what we can do, and then let him do the rest.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not something that we can talk about it all day long, but until you do it or until you have that moment with Jesus where it's like you just have this, you're falling on the ground. That moment where you're just like, I don't know what to do. It's basically you're trying to think of the term now. My mind's blanking. Just that. desperate point of desperation, right? Everyone's point of desperation is different. And the thing is it's not until then that you realize how amazing Jesus really is. And it's hard to describe to somebody who hasn't had that moment yet. Now there's some people that don't have that moment, but there's a point where belief and relationship, there's
Yeah.
always that point that changes, and it's that point that's different for everybody. Everybody's story, everybody's relationship with Jesus is different, and how we come in relationship is always different. But until you have that moment, you can't describe what it means to have a relationship with Jesus
Do you
to
think that
the
in that
degree.
moment, it's like an ultimate moment of surrender? I think,
Yes,
right? Where
I
you're so
do.
desperate and you're like, wow, I cannot do this. And I surrender it to you.
Yes.
And then in that letting go is where that relationship starts, like in
And
that
that's
deep,
where
deep
the
way.
you start seeing the miracles of Jesus and how
Mhm.
good he is and how much he loves you. And it's a journey because, like, mine started because of financial. I lost my job, and we were in financial strife, and I was having all this anxiety. I was doing Uber Eats just to make ends meet. And anybody doing Uber Eats, unless they're young, is doing it out of desperation. You don't make any money, but it pays enough that you can pay your phone bill or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? And I was sitting in a car. I was at McDonald's picking up an order, and I heard the Holy Spirit say, "Go tell that woman that you just passed from the bathroom that I love her." And I wasn't going to do it. I was being disobedient, but then I said, excuse my
Mhm.
language, but I
Yeah,
was
I
like,
know.
I'm just going to do it. So I
Yeah.
did it, and I got this happiness, a little bit of happiness. And then I was sitting in my car praying to God, saying, having that desperate conversation with him. And I look over and there's a sunset, which he knows I love sunsets. And at that point, I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I need you." And then the thing is we were in disobedience. He had asked us to sell our house and to go on the road and live in an RV. I think I don't know how far after that we just said yes, but it got to the point where we had to sell our house or go into foreclosure, right?
Yeah.
So we said yes. And between that moment at the sunset in my car and saying yes is when I started seeing the miracles of God. And that's when I'm like, I just want more of him. And
Yeah.
so that's when I started saying, okay, I'm going to look for a devotional. And because, we got enough money from our business to be able to pay the mortgage off. So we didn't go into foreclosure. And so then I was like, I just want more of God and his goodness and his peace. And so I started, like, I want a devotional. And one of the things at the mission when we were there together with us, it was like a decade earlier, was I always looked to people to know what a relationship was. And so when I was saying I wanted more of Jesus, I was looking for a specific devotional, and God did not let me find that devotional. And so I always say he tricked me into building my own devotional. And so I took a 365-day calendar book,
Yeah.
and I wrote a scripture every day. And for 2 years, I did that for 2 years. And now I know him greater than ever. And there is nothing in this world that can make me walk away again like I did after the divorce. And
Yeah.
things have hard, and so it's just, I wish I could explain it. I just want to go up to people and shake them and say, hey, you need to know Jesus. You need to have a relationship with him. It'll make your life so much better.
I
you know
know. I
my
know. I
stepdaughter
totally,
was killed. Yeah, my stepdaughter was killed 2 years ago. Life has been not easy, but because of him, I still can have peace,
yeah.
you know
And that's the most precious, especially in those moments of incredible, hardship,
Yes.
whatever that looks
Yes.
like. Yes, I know. And that's the difference. I know. And, even, a part of my story has I had a daughter, that I gave up for adoption during the years of my addiction. And that was the piece that, I couldn't forgive myself for. And so many people would say, well, you did a wonderful thing, and I could hear that. And I was like, well, I believe that for other people, but I always wanted to be a mom. And I make a great mom.
Yes, you do.
Not at that time, I sure didn't.
No.
And so that was the piece I couldn't forgive. And so it's been an open adoption. And I don't know why I brought this up at this point, but it's something I love to share for encouragement because, for anyone, for whatever reason, had to have that happen. Today she's 16 and she knows my youngest daughter who I have, who's named Esther, and she's 6. So 6 and 16,
Yeah.
and she's back in our lives. And actually, oh my
So
gosh,
amazing.
I want to. So she just flew to London. I took her to the airport yesterday. I have to share this. So she calls me Kristy, and she has her
Uh,
adoptive mom, who she calls mom, but she
uh,
calls me mom. But that was just a piece where whatever she wants to do, I want her to be comfortable. I just want to be there for whatever.
right.
But anyway, she gives me this card before she leaves for the airport, and I'll share it with you because I think this is like the pinnacle, the highlight of our relationship rebuilding so far. So she was here staying with us for some time,
Okay.
and she said, "Dear Mom," which I was like, "Oh, dear Mom, thank you for being the most amazing mother. I love you more than anything. I know we have had our ups and downs, but I just want you to know I will always love you and you will always be my mom. You are the kindest, most amazing person. You inspire me to be the best person I can be. You make me feel so loved and accepted. I love you. Love, Sky." And
Oh,
I
I
have this
love
in my purse
that.
just to carry, but that, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Being able to forgive myself and have God forgive me, 5 years. Well, God already forgave me, but I think her seeing me in that way, she doesn't say I forgive you, but you know what I mean, the essence of
Right.
that. Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
And
So that's
does she know your story and why
yes.
and all?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, of course. Yeah, she
Yes.
does. She does. So the Lord has been really faithful in that. That just happened yesterday. So he's,
That's,
continuing to work in all those prayers that we've prayed all those years, 10 years, 20
yeah,
years long prayers that we pray for our children, that we pray for each other's children. The Lord does answer.
he does.
So
That's
it's
so
been
amazing. That makes my
it's
heart
beautiful.
warm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been beautiful. And so I just being in partnership, God's looking for partners. Being in partnership with God is just there's nothing better. So
Yeah, there's nothing
yeah.
better at all. And so, one of the things that I learned working at the mission is from people like you willing to share your story. I mean, for that moment, it was more for donations and that kind of thing. But what I learned for myself was that I think back on all of the troubled kids in middle school, all the kids that started drinking or doing drugs or whatever in middle school and causing a lot of problems in class and all of that. And I just know now because it seems like middle school is that pinnacle time that if there's anybody that is using, and this was my generation, I don't know what it is like now, but you work at a high school, so you probably
I
know. But
do. I
if you
do.
see anybody in middle school that's doing those things, their home life is not good. Now, high school is a
Yeah.
little bit different. It's more about being accepted and wanting to be accepted. But there's still some of those kids that have come into high school already partying that their home lives are probably good.
Yes,
But you also work at an alternative high school.
I do.
So these kids have already had struggles in a normal setting of a high school. And so how is your experience helping with the kids?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. I love that question. So that feels it's such a full circle, time to be able to be now. I take the kids' stories and I tell them in a way that helps promote, donations. So I'm in fundraising now
Yeah.
here at Eastside Academy, and we are an alternative Christian high school, and we provide small class size high school education for any sort of learning challenge or anything like that. We're here. We are able to help with that. credit recovery for those students who may have been kicked out or expelled. We accept them. We want them here. Those struggling with addiction, those struggling with mental health or perhaps self-harm or eating challenges, eating disorders, things like that. We are a school for them. And so what we do is I say we are a Christian because everyone that works here believes in God, much like when you signed the thing saying, yes,
Yeah.
I believe this is true. So all of our staff have that, and we all have a very beautiful relationship with Christ. And so the students are surrounded by people who have that relationship, and they hear about it here and there. But most of our students, I'd say like 80%, probably don't even believe in Jesus, but they've come to us because we love them and we're here to help. And so we surround them with
Right.
people who love Christ. And then they do have chapel on Fridays, so they get that exposure on Friday that they get to learn about Christ, and whether that's hearing the stories of people who have had redemption like you and I,
Mhm.
or it's a story out of the Bible. They get to have that experience as well. Whether they choose to step into that or not is completely up to them. But through all of
Right.
that, we also have a housing option. We have counseling for them once a week. They have a counselor. They have recovery classes, peer support groups, in addition to high school education and chapel. And then we have a housing option if they need it. We have a girls' house and a boys' house. And so we can also take them in and house them in a home that has house parents. So it's very much a family home environment. So there's, up to 6 kids in each house. And so it's amazing. And I've heard so many people say it sounds too good to be true, but it's not. I'm here to tell you, I've lived the life of the students that we have and the support we offer all of our students that graduate. They get into college. So we have them apply to college and we help them in whatever way they need. And so whether their story is that, they come in with Fs and they have to show their transcript, we have teachers that will write letters to explain what was going on at that time. And we haven't had anyone yet not accept that as a good reason for, you know,
That's amazing.
yeah. And so they get into college. And I have this here. We just graduated 7 seniors. This is a graduation invite. I have it on my desk.
Aw.
7 seniors. They all got into college, and some of them, their stories are even harder than yours and mine. And they're young. And so they've gotten to a place where they're able to get a real chance at life. And so it's beautiful. And I love it. And I get to share my story with the students as appropriate. I did get to share my story with the seniors as a part of a class project they were doing. And then also just my story enables me to know the different kinds of needs and the different ways to be respectful and honoring when I share their stories to bring in support to help more students
Right.
in our
Yes.
community. So it's beautiful, and it's such an honor to be a part of. But yeah, we're East Side Academy, and we're on the East Side in Bellevue. People
Yeah.
think what we don't need to give money to people in Bellevue. The truth of the matter is we're located in Bellevue because there's Bellevue Presbyterian Church has offered us part of their building and 2 homes to do this work.
Right.
And so we get to be blessed to be in Bellevue, but we serve students in the greater Seattle area and beyond. So they come from all over. We just happen to be located here because they have been so gracious in helping us afford to be able to do this work. So it's really cool.
When you see a child that like reminds you of you,
Yeah.
what goes through your brain?
Yeah, I do. A lot of them do. There's this one in particular. She's no longer with us. I actually had the opportunity to mentor her for some time. It was a very short time. And then she made some choices. And so she's found herself on a different path. I pray that one day she makes it back. But yeah, I would sit with her and we would talk and we would, kind of identify with each other and be in that space of where she is now and where I once was, and just lifting her up, being allowed to pray over her, pray even some different deliverance type messages in my prayers for her, where it's like if anything's attached or there that's not of you, Lord, like we agree to release that, and we agree to just bring in what's of the Lord. So I got to pray over her, and I got to encourage her and just let her know, this doesn't have to be your story. And she was like, what does that mean? And I was like, well, what it means is you're at a place and you're at a point in your life where the choices you make, you have the ability to make choices where your story could be very different. um, and so I mean, that's just wonderful and meaningful. And I pray that that stays with her, that she knows that that is true. Because in that moment, I could
Well,
tell
you totally
she did.
planted a seed, but so
Yeah. Yeah.
but sometimes the pain wins. Sometimes the negative voice wins for a moment.
Yeah. And so
but
the
that
acting
doesn't
out
mean,
of that
yeah,
pain was what sent her in a different direction. And so, and
yeah,
that's okay. Like, I believe that we helped her at the time in her story that God had, and that whether it's we come back with her or if she finds it somewhere else, I pray for her. And I know that the Lord has her just from the prayers that we were able to pray. So
that's
that
awesome.
is, that is a beautiful, like, treasured sacred space to be able to be in with some of these young people. And there's one that reminds me of my daughter and her story. And she's one of the gals on the picture I just showed you that is graduating, and she is going to SPU. And
Yeah,
she's incredibly smart and incredibly capable. And I got to go with someone and like help her pick out her graduation dress. It's just really special. So the work we get to do is pretty special, and I feel honored that the Lord allowed me to be here and a part of it. And so,
yeah,
yeah, it's
and
been really cool.
isn't that what it's about? You take your own experiences and you share it,
Yeah,
People can deny God all they want, but they cannot deny God in our stories. And,
yeah,
I know there were so many times that I saw women come into the shelter who had just black eyes, dark
yeah,
with the
yeah,
pain. And as soon as they started accepting and opening up their heart to Christ, you would see the color of their eyes again. You would see their
yeah,
smile. You would see their face. There was it's like that God just takes away the shame. It's like when they walk in, you feel this shame. That's no one grows up and says, "Hey, I want to be molested by a family member." Alcohol and drugs numbs that pain, so I'm going to go down this road and be instantly addicted and go to jail and become a dealer. No one says that's what they want for their life. But
no,
because when our pain and we often don't have that support, and Satan is super good at manipulating us, but we don't know it because we're not in that space. But now look at you.
yeah,
It's like God is taking you and now you're strong for God and Jesus, and you're helping others and you share your story. And I just think you are beautiful inside and out. And, I've always loved you and I love you more. I'm just really glad that we were able to reconnect again.
me
I've
too, me
always,
too.
I've always loved you. I think you
Yeah,
are just always were an amazing person. And and have a beautiful smile. And so, and I just think
thank you.
that God, that you chose to turn your life around and came to the mission and open your heart to God. And wasn't an easy process. I know was there. It
Yeah,
was not an easy process, but I'm so glad we have the same best friend.
I know. It's so true. It's so true. It's the difference between life and death.
It is. It truly is. And I wake
Yeah.
up every morning and just say, God, I need you. I need your help to get through this day. I don't know what it holds, and the world is crazy. And I just need you. And it's
Yeah.
like I need him as much as I need air, to breathe and live, you
It's
know.
true. It's true. And
And
he
I just
promises to never leave us. And that's such a comfort. I used to
exactly.
think that was like kind of like, oh, well, okay, great. Like it didn't have it just seemed abstract. But now it's like,
Yeah.
that's the one thing, even to being alone in a solitary cell in jail
Yes.
or prison, he's still there. Like he was still
Yeah.
there.
And me wondering where, worrying, stressing about being, I'm homeless, not necessarily, but,
Yeah.
just selling. I mean, you know, it's just, you just get to that point and every point is different. And sometimes it's health, and sometimes it's financial, and sometimes it's pain from a childhood. But there is a point, and it's sad that we have to get there, but that's what the deserts and the valleys are
Yeah.
for. It's
Yeah.
what brings us closer to Him, and they are painful. I hate
Yes.
them.
Yes. I
We're
wouldn't trade him for the
stubborn.
world either.
I know, I
Yeah.
wouldn't. And we're
I know.
stubborn, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah.
I just, and God has such a sense of humor, it's like some of the things. I'm like, really, God, you want me to live in an RV? I hate camping. Although living in an
Exactly.
RV is not camping, but still,
Yes. Yes. I
you
do
know?
know. Yes, yes. Never
Yeah.
say never.
Oh, I have learned that big time. And you know what's really funny is I had a friend, or she was a client of our business, and she was living in an RV because she couldn't live in the house that she bought because it was contaminated from meth dealers that used to live there.
Yep.
And so she lived in an RV, a fifth wheel. And I said, I would never want to live in a fifth wheel. Well, what did I do for 2 years? Live in a fifth
Yep.
wheel because I said,
Yep.
I never say never.
I know. And then I listened to some of that story of yours, and I remember hearing that you said that there were some of the most precious times ever that you wouldn't have
Yes.
ever had if you didn't do it. And so,
Exactly. It was like the
yeah.
best year. I got to see places that I haven't been. I got to have relationships with my nieces and my
Yeah.
nephews. And it was so, yeah, it was like the most amazing, so much so that we're actually planning on doing it again this winter. We're going to be snowbirds and we've been remodeling the RV and we're going to go, we're going to leave in the month or 2 and just like go out on the road and go see the world.
It's
Not the
amazing.
world, but the US.
Yeah.
You can't take an RV over
I don't think
the
so.
ocean, but unless somebody knows out there that if there's a ferry that allows RVs that
There you
goes to
go.
Europe, let me
Yeah.
know. Well, Christy, I love you, and it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and I'm glad we finally got to have this happen, and it's been an
Yeah.
amazing conversation. And you are just a testament to Christ, and I
Yeah.
just love that God made our paths cross way back then and now most recently. So I'm
Yeah.
super happy and makes me one day my goal is to meet your kids, but we live a little far
Yes.
away from each other, but I would love to meet your daughter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, well, will you take care of yourself and we will talk very soon.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.